just got to have the most wonderful conversation I've had in probably 2 weeks. You guys just hang in there with me as we go through this. It's another ALS-500. I know, I know, you guys. I've done quite a few of these here lately. This is the last one I know of that's in here. Now there might be something stuffed in a cardboard box I haven't seen, but this is the last one I've seen that I know of. This is a later version. The serial number on this one is 15,317. The last one I had up here, the serial number was in the 12,000s, and it was much older than this. There is no QC tag, quality control sticker. This is a newer version with the remotes on the face, right? Please note the laminate hasn't started to come apart on the front of the face yet. It will happen. If it was up to me, I'd take a piece of clear tape and I'd go right down the edge of this, right here. Because what causes it to peel up is people grabbing it from the front and then taking their fingers and dragging it across the front. It peels the laminate away. This guy got this amplifier for a steal, right? And he got a really good deal on this. A friend of his sold it to him. And he's 70 plus years old. And he's got a very small station. Well, very small space for a station. And this is the smallest footprint, highest power output that he's wanting to invest. And he's made it very clear to me on the phone that this will probably be his last amplifier that he's going to ever have, and he's going to run this until he's not able to be on radio anymore. He does not care really that much about the budget on this deal. He wants every good part that I can put in this thing. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to throw the kitchen sink at this. My entire goal here with this one here is to make it bullet proof. We're going to play with how the fan turns on, because stock they're set at like 140 or 160. I'm going to make it so this thing turns on at about 80 or 90. So I've discussed with him the style of radio operator he is, how long he stays on the microphone, how many nets he keys it or goes into. Is he a CW operator or sideband operator? We covered everything, because I want to create out of this flaming turd. God, I so wish. I need to find me some financial backers. I really do, because there's no way. I would love to build this, but better. Like this band board. I've never had one of these fail. This band board. This I've had fail many times. And a lot of different things here fail. The heatsink is too small. This combiner board metering circuit works great. This plug sucks balls. Just, it straight up sucks dick. It does. Right? This whole display is from the 80s. We could do all of this completely different with a digital modulated supply. I would love to do this again, but with a different layout. I know that I can do a better job than these guys ever could have making an all band, type accepted, legally on paper, ready to rock and roll board amplifier than this. I've got to figure it out, because there's a giant hole that's in the market right now for this. With MFJ going under and Ameritron going bye-bye too, dude, think about it. You open up any QST, any ham radio outlet, 90% of those magazines were all Ameritron products or MFJ subsidiaries, right? There's a huge market for this. And what do we got? We got the SS750, we've got the Metrons, we've got Ameritron. There's a couple other all-band amps that are out there that are solid state, but not many. We can do better as a community, we can. I would love to redesign something and just have this just get manufactured. I stay here, do this, but it get manufactured. I've got to do something. There's a lot of solder work on here that I feel is a little, well, shit, to put it mildly. The solder work that's here is horrid. This is where your RF input comes from. It's on this side and it hits this attenuator. I swear to God, like a 2-year-old globbed this all together. So I've got a lot of stuff I got to rework. This definitely has some burnt transistors in it. How do we know this? This whole section is burned up. So we've got to pull this board out. It's no big deal. We've done this in the last couple videos. I can do this with my eyes blindfolded now. I probably will pull up the board. The actual final PA board. I'm going to disconnect it, pull it up. We'll flip it over. There's some caps on the bottom that... look at that. I didn't see that till right now. We'll come back to that. There's some caps on the bottom of this thing that have been a little notorious. Never seen these break down until like the last 4 months. I had one show up here about a month ago where all the non-resonant the capacitors that we put on the positive rail and knock the RF off to keep it from creeping back up the lines. Yeah, those have melted down and caused fire and smoke and damage and shit. So we're going to change all those caps out on the bottom side. We're going to go to surface mount SMAs that can hold more heat. We're going to change out these 2 caps here because I've seen those fail here recently. We're going to add 2 more electrolytics. And we're going to add 2 more 104s on this side. On the bottom side, we're probably going to go to 200 nanofarads to get rid of that secondary harmonic hump that so far with these newer versions, not the older ones, the newer ones, there's a little tiny harmonic spur that's present. When you're running in 40 and 20, we're going to choke that out by adding some caps on the bottom of this thing. We're going to throw the kitchen sink at it. And the guy says, just make it so this thing is perfect. What caught my attention, what made me laugh and smile a little bit, is here's our quality control sticker. This is made on 3/20. So do it with me. January, February, March 20. 4-year-old amp. It's got the RF parts PP100s, which are HGs in it. They're all coming out. We're going to put Toshibas in here, obviously, because we wanted to make it so it's indestructible. So why not put good parts in it? I've got them. There's like solder splash between here and the trace on the attenuator. We'll give it a bath. There's part of me that wants to take the band board out and make sure all the solder joints on it are perfect as well too. But I've never had one of these fail. He's got the 10-meter board sitting here. They're sitting down there for him. He ordered that up as soon as he sent this thing off to me. Let's give this guy a fair shake. Let's get to it. All right, for those of you that wonder how I do this plug, this is how I do them. Take the plug, I drill the hole out on the back, I relief it. Then I take and I counter ream it on both sides with a deburring tool so that nothing can rub against the PCB jacket that's on the outside of this. He needs 3 foot, if that, worth of power wire to go from his power supply to this thing. We're going to consolidate everything down. Now, I don't like to do multiple positive leads and multiple grounds. You guys have heard me bitch about that before, even though we've got them all tied together here. I take this, put it lengthways, I take this far end pin, take this far pin and I'll tie it to these 3. So this top corner becomes all positive, then the bottom end becomes all negative. Tie all 3 of these bottom leads together. Then I come back and I bolster the solder joint with heat shrink epoxy to just support the joint a little bit. Remember, this is all going to get hidden inside the cap and there's not a lot of vibration. I do this on all of them though. There's nothing special here, right? His eyelets on his power supply wires, which are here, are about that kind of opening. Exact same size orifice. So we're going to give him much more substantial eyelets to hook up to his power supply. We're doubling the size of the wire, and the run distance from the power supply is much shorter. Come to find out, he runs everything at about 13-ish, 13.8 volts. I said, nah, bring that up, bring it up to 14.5. The amp's going to appreciate you, and all your equipment's going to run more efficiently. Solder, heat shrink, solder, heat shrink. I even do it on the remote wire. My goal is once I get this put together, the last thing that the customer's got to worry about failing is this plug underneath the cap. Not this style of amplifier, but some other tube equipment I've worked on. I've had these plugs catch on fire. I've had the pins back out, especially these newer ones. The older ones were made from a different style of plastic that wasn't as prone to heat. There's a certain builder out there right now that uses these to go from the RF deck down to the power supply. So far I've seen the newer plugs that he's put on stuff, like 50% of those fail. So I don't trust these plugs for shit all, right? They've got a good strain relief system on them, but you got to heat shrink everything just in case one pin works its way out. Ideally, what happens is this guy gets this piece of equipment, he puts it in line, he puts the plug on the back of the amp, never has to unplug it or plug it back in. I don't like these plugs. I don't like these Jones plugs. The older ones, great. The newer ones, they're crap. They're made in China. This is one of the newer style. So he's gonna plug it in, he's probably gonna leave it forever. So we're gonna leave it just like that. I'm gonna go ahead and sweat the eyelets on. And I have not been hydraulically crimping these. Haven't seen any real point for this. I got a special kind of solder. I overkill the flux on this. I heat it up, heat the wire up, pre-solder the wire, put the solder and put the wire into the eyelet. There's no pull load, there's no tension, there's no torque load, there's nothing on this. So we just need the electrical connection, which this can carry 3 to 4 times the amount of current that the wire could ever pull. Right? Enough said. Math. It's on our side for reasons. So, this plug here, what we do is we take our remote on lead and we push this through here, like so. And then we go down here, we grab up our positives, we grab up our negatives, we push them all through the Jones plug, like so. Negative side goes through here, positive side goes through there. Partridge in a pear tree. Jesus learns how to play a flute through his wrist. Sam Kennison comes back and tells us more freaking punchlines for BB to recite on video. And we bring these down to a point. We don't let our wires cross. And then we slide the plug, just like so. We straighten up our wires coming out. We want our remote wire to come down the middle so it's protected. And we'll take another piece of heat shrink and we slide it over the tail so that when we pinch down with the strain reliefs, we're not pinching directly onto the cables or pinching onto the heat shrink. And we'll also use epoxy-based heat shrink there. Now, because there's so much flux on this thing, no, that's not boy jizz, that's flux. I got to come back and I got to wipe the whole head down with rubbing alcohol to make sure it's clean. And while I'm at it, I'm going to clean this up too so I don't get any more transfer. That's what we're doing. So the end result is this. Nice clean plug. Wires are all supported. The solder joints are all insulated and encapsulated inside the Jones plug. There's no vibration, so we don't have to worry about that. And down here, I have nice soldered ends that are, once again, supported by heat shrink tubing. It's got epoxy in it, so we don't have to worry about vibrations or anything here. And we end up just having a nice power whip for this guy. Normally what I do is I'll put like an Anderson plug right here and then let the owner figure it out. I suggest 4 gauge, by the way, from your battery to the Anderson plug. This shit is woefully, wait for it, inadequate. This is double the size of the wire. So we're literally, well, doubling up the size of the wire feeding the amp. Like I've said in many, many other videos, the idea is to help keep the voltage up, right? We want to lower that resistance from either it be the power supply, which is source of generation, or the alternator in your vehicle, not your battery. Your battery is just a storage device. Your alternator is the thing that generates the higher voltage, which we want to capitalize on. Amperage is universal, it stays consistent, but we consume more amperage with the lower voltage, and then the parts get hotter. So we want to keep the voltage up, amperage draw down, temperature down. And so I say turn that voltage up a little bit. He ain't gonna hurt nothing. Okay, now that we got a good power whip built for this thing, we can set this thing aside. I'll lay it over there for right now. And by the way, these Kinepic scissors kick ass. I have yet to find anything I can't trim in here, power wire wise. And they cut everything perfectly straight. I love these things. Okay, onto the amp. Protecting that faceplate. First thing we're going to do is pull all the positive wire out. We're going to replace that. Gone. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull all the transistors out. I'm not going to even bother hooking it up and testing it. I do not care. Each one of these parts cost each one of these transistors cost MFJ, Ameritron. I think if you buy these in bulk, about $17 a piece. And we're going to replace them with unobtainium, very expensive transistors. But we'll go in here, we'll jerk these out, we'll test them to find what's good, what's bad. But it's obvious, looking how burned up this board is here, and these resistors are, we've seen better days. This is going to go away. We're going to replace this with high temp silicone boot wire, and we'll add some ferrite on this. But first things first, transistors out, power wires out. Get the transistors out, we'll pull the board up, and we'll do the work on the other side. So power wires first, then transistors. Had an interesting conversation today. I'm going to share it with you, even though you guys didn't ask. So suck on it. You're my captive audience unless you hit the back button or escape. I had a gentleman call me today, oddly enough, and when I woke up this morning, I didn't think I'd be doing Ameritron stuff all day. And I hadn't quite orientated myself on what I was going to do for projects yet. And he was talking to me about these caps here on the bottom side. He's a proactive kind of guy. I admire that. I do. He decided that he was going to pull his Ameritron apart and see if his caps were breaking down on his Ameritron like what they were breaking down on the one that I had here just recently for repair. Like I said in the previous segmento, I did a previous video. I don't know. You can go back and watch it. At this point, I think I should put together a playlist of these for these. But for whatever reason, we've had these caps short out and fail, and then take everything that they're attached with down with them. Right? So I'm going to come and I'm going to replace these with SMAs. That way I don't ever have to worry about it again for this guy. But the conversation we had was about the heatsink. And as we were wrapping up the phone call, he closed with a very interesting statement to me. He says, you know, while I've got this apart, I've been thinking that maybe I should go ahead and buff down the machining tools on this thing, the tool marks on the heatsink, and lap the heatsink. And I said, well, you could do that if you want, I guess. I mean, you could. It's your piece of equipment. No one's stopping you. I said, that's a great idea, man. Then I sat there and I thought, no, that's not such a great idea. Let me explain to you why. This is going to get really simple for you here really quick. What is the coating on this heatsink? It's anodization. This is an anodized piece of metal, right? Anodized coating has a magical effect, and I strongly suggest that you radio gurus out there Google this. By this heat sink being anodized, it dramatically increases its ability to be able to conduct heat. Dramatically. Right? Like a large calculable effect. Google this. I was not aware of this. I always thought it was, oh, the anodized coating was for the look and blah, blah, blah. It has nothing to do with looks. Believe me, most of my CB brethren will attest to the fact that there isn't an amp builder out there that isn't ready to go ahead and just cut every penny out of every situation that he could possibly ever find, ever. And if it is a cent cheaper to not use anodized, people are not going to use anodized. So they increase the size of the heat sink. That anodized coating allows us to shrink the heat sink and increases its efficiency at certain things. Google it. So I loaded his mind full of that specific knowledge. When this dawned on me when I was younger, I was like, wow. That's when I started thinking about coating. Like erudite coating on aluminum makes a big difference in how it conducts as well. It affects the magic shmoo. This is a very well tested, tried, true, got math to back it up thing. It's real. This is a real thing. But what I said to him was, I wouldn't be so concerned about little heat sink marks and how there's actually two schools of thought. One, we want this completely smooth, and two, we want to have just a little bit of a scratch to it. Me personally, I think everything should be as perfectly smooth as glass as we possibly can get it. That's the mantra I adhere to. But I told him, if I was going to do anything, I'd make sure these holes are chamfered out. Because I've seen this aluminum peeling up. I've seen that kill more amplifiers ever. If you ever have an amplifier that keeps killing a transistor in one spot over and over and over and over and over again, go check your chamfered on your holes. And make sure they're not squeezed up like a titty. Or if you pinch it real hard. And you all know what I'm talking about. You don't really have to pinch that hard. You can just kind of, and then. When I mean flat, I mean flat. We don't want to have any kind of rise, nothing. So, without getting a metrolitized, actual, perfectly flat square, this is the closest I'm going to get, and this is relatively. And I say this relatively straight, this edge. I should have a nice piece of granite I can lay under and be like, anyhow, okay. Until I watch way too much YouTube about random shit. I went down this rabbit hole the other day about flat, what really flat is. And can we actually drill a hole that's round? Answer to that question is no. We have a better chance of punch pressing a hole that's round, extruding a hole that's round, than we do of actually drilling a hole that's round. But we can get really close. Okay, we're talking on a very, very, very splitting hairs of minutia detail quality, right? I'm glad my job is so easy. Okay, compared to some of the things that are out there in this world to do. Let's carefully flip this around. And actually, I think what I want to do, I'm going to do something I've never done before. Yes, I am. It's all right, everybody. Relax. I know a guy that can fix it if I mess up. Might look remarkably like me, but I'm just saying. Relax. You're with a professional. All right. I've actually taken one of these boards out before. I normally just work around the case. See, look, it's got heat discolorization to it, and this has gotten really hot. Huh. Sitting here thinking, I can't help but notice these are our two positive hookup points on the board, right? The way these traces are laid out, they're front feeding each one of the transistors. They're not bringing the power in from on the back of the transformer. That's the reason they got so much capacitance down here. I mean, this will also answer a debate that I was having with the same guy that I had the conversation with the heatsink about. He was asking me about this, the value of the caps, and I was like, I think they're 300 nanofarad. I didn't have the schematic or want to go look one up. Yeah, 330 nanofarad. He goes, well, mine's are reading 0.003 or something. I'm like, dude, 330 nanofarad, right? But my brain was telling me 220 nanofarad, and that's what I told him like 4 times on the phone. I'm like, dude, it's like 300 or 200 or something. So when you front feed a transformer like this with 12 volt, and this is coming from a guy that maybe for a decade now has been front feeding his transistors. I do my little choke, and the choke's there for a reason, and I bring the wire over the top of the transformer and I bring it right down to the circuit. And then, you know, I used to get heat from people because they thought that they could say I didn't know how to calculate inductance ratio for frequency and resonance. It's okay. I read the same ARRL handbook as the rest of you guys. It's okay. I got out my abacus and I figured it out, right? You can have RF leak back up this rail really easy. One, its inductor length is going to be prone to multiple resonant points in the frequency. But there's no choke. They have no ferrite whatsoever as a choke leading up to the positive lead. So you have to compensate for that with capacitance, but then you also have to take that capacitance into account when because remember, these are through hole traces, right? So whatever capacitance you add on the bottom also in turn is going to affect up top how this circuit's going to field flux, right? I digress. It's just stuff that just popped in my brain. This little guy over here, this little trace, is this burble coming up in here. And I was looking at this, I'm like, man, that looks kind of burned. But we don't know anything. Wait, maybe you're saying it looks and you think and you're feeling it, you should know. Flux can be deceiving. That's all I'm going to say. It's, what's in question is this top corner here, you guys. Right here. This is really dark. And that was right underneath the capacitor. Well, the other reason I want to pull the board out was to afford me the opportunity to do this right here. I want to wash the top and the bottom of this thing and get it spotless. So like I was saying before I started boring y'all, Clean, no burn mark. No carbon. Clean, no burn mark, no carbon. It's really important that we don't have any carbon there on that side of the trace, right? Because if we had a little bit of carbon buildup, man, depending on the frequency, that carbon conducts. So, frequency and voltage. Okay, so this is all prepped up. New thermal compound added. So, all I got to do is peel up the tape and bolt down the board. I want to go back before I bolt the board down though. I want to put some capped on tape on the back of the board. But we're ready. We're ready to put this back together. So let me get this all put back together and get some more capped on tape on it. There's a couple spots I want to put capped on tape on it. And we'll put our spacers on. And then we'll bolt everything down. And then we'll start putting this back together. I cannot wait to see how this board runs. I cannot wait. You know, I remember reading in a book one time about how you don't want to use solid core coax in any kind of mobile application, ever. So we got the transistors put back in, and the reason we did the transistors now is because the thermal compound is exposed, everything is spotlessly clean. Get the board on, get the transistors down, keep the dirt out of the thermal paste. Right? Because the rest of it we can work around. We can wash debris away with rubbing alcohol, we can blow it off in the air compressor, we pick it out of there with a dental pick. But if shit gets underneath those transistors, all this work that we just put in, this last like 30 minutes, and from your point of view, 30 minutes, my point of view, last 4.5, 5 hours worth of work will go to waste. So we get the board down as quick as we can, we get the transistors down in the pockets as quick as we can. So I thought I'd come over here and we'd repair this. Well, as I was taking this off, let's make it focus here. Got a little bit of discolorization. I got to get in here and we got to clean all this burn off. But when I went to lift the board out, I went, this solid wall coax should be soldered here, and its center conductor should be here. And the remnants of the center conductor are still in this trace. This coax broke off. And it runs over, and it goes over here to the input of the band selector board. And then the output, of this whole mess goes up to this shitty connector here. Look at this. This is just solid center conductor dual shielded wire coax, but I am going to take this out of here and we're going to replace that with some RG400 DS, the dual shielded RG400. When we go to put it back together, and because we're operating underneath the circumstances that we are, we're gonna replace this with some 400 this here and this here. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take the time, we're gonna lift out this board, and I'm gonna examine all the traces on the bottom side of this board, because let's face it, MFJ solder techniques, especially on the newer ones, not like the last one that was here, which was a really, really old model, and the one before that was really, really old. The new ones, we got to keep a close eye on it. I'm flirting with the idea of replacing this with RG316, but this solid core shit pretty sure this is the reason our box burned up, is because the transistors had no place to let the RF out. It was going through our little combiner setup here. And, I mean, this solder blob is just epic. Bloop. Alright, let's see if I can salvage this trace. Usually this one burns up when I gotta change out the resistors. So I'll go in here and I gotta grind and sand and re-clear and make it so that carbon score isn't there and it doesn't conduct anymore. So this first, this second, and then this third, which I don't think I've ever shown this on video before where I pulled this out. So we'll see. Hold on. Jesus Christ, MFJ. Okay, so yeah, trace came off. Knew that was going to happen. Was able to salvage these two fairly well. Got the blob of shit off of here. The problem is the blob of shit that's attached here on this trace. So 100% of our RF comes out. Problem is, this blob of shit underneath is touching. If I rotate this ferrite around, you can see the burn mark on the ferrite where it's been arcing over. Look, the idea is that the ferrite conducts. Okay, so the idea is that we want the RF to float on the wire and not have contact with the ferrite. I've had several amps in the past that have shown up here where somebody else owned them. They're like, I can't figure out what's wrong with it, or they built it or whatever. And come to find out it's this wire is making contact with the ferrite, or this wire is making contact with the ferrite, or this center conductor is making contact with the ferrite. We can't have this touching ferrite. This wire's got to float above all that, right? So how we fix that is we got to desolder this, desolder here, pull the whole bead off, pull the whole combiner off, and then we can either rewrap it. That's option number one, which we probably won't do. Option number two is we take and we slide capped on tape after we clean that solder joint up, and we pull the wire away from the ferrite, and we slide a couple layers of capped on tape underneath there, right? That is what we got to do. I'm on the phone with a customer at the moment, gentlemen. So where we're at now is I come back and I scraped all the black carbon off here. We've covered why we have to do this. Came back and I filled this in with 2-part epoxy, clear epoxy, and then I came back and I cleared it. And like I've said before in many other videos, and just in case this is your first time watching, long time listener, first time caller kind of thing, we have to get rid of the carbon because it conducts, right? So we scrape down to where we have clean fiberglass, and then we backfill with 2-part epoxy because it's really the surface area. So we're trying to create an insulated state between the carbon score that's deep inside the fiberglass. So then we put down the 2-part epoxy, and then over that we put a layer of clear. And the clear allows us to seal the epoxy, one, and two, it's the dielectric principles of the epoxy versus the paint are completely different. So it allows us to have a little bit higher insulation value. Come back here on the back side, rebuilt this trace that popped off, but how we're going to address this so this doesn't ever happen again, like I was saying 3 segments ago in this video, I think we could do better, right? I'd love to remanufacture something like this, but it would have to have a little bit of twists added to it. Like we're going to make it so that the resistors sit up off the board. So when they do fail, there's no heat transfer from the resistors burning off to the fiberglass. All we got to do is change out the resistors. What they could have done is put a solder via here and a solder via here and had a solder pad here and another solder pad here and another solder pad on the top of the board. So all we had to do is come in here and unsolder the resistor from the traces, change it out. The other thing I decided to do, remember we were just talking about this in the last segment about how I was going to put some capped on tape on this, blah, 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 and I was going to call it in on the repair. I went ahead and unwound one of these. I've never unwound the combiner before. This is a piece of solid core wire. Shame on you, MFJ. You should know fucking better. Second thing in here we've had fail from solid core wire. Anyhow, this little nut, nurble, tab, solder point, whatever you want to call it right here, they take this wire and they solder it right to this thing. Well, I undid this leg and I undid this leg on the combiner, and the whole combiner fell off. So not only was the solder connection here, so this is ground for the coax, the center conductor goes here, not only was it broke off here, but the combiner was broke off at the titty, this little nibble. I'm sure there's a technical term out there. I'm not going to go look it up, nor do I care, and I've already forgotten about that we were talking about it. This is the combiner that I've rewrapped for this guy. This is stranded, silver plated, copper, Teflon wire. This will last a lot longer. So we'll trim this nut back. Now please take note that we've twisted the Teflon wire, so we've got ourselves like a 1/4 of an inch worth of insulation. We're going to take the combiner and set it up off the board just a little bit too. Yeah, it adds a little bit more inductor to the circuit. Wire length. Inductor is a fancy word for wire length. I think we'll be okay. So once we get this put back together, which will be about 5 minutes from now, we're going to pull this out, and then we're going to pull this out and flip it over. And I want to look at all the solder joints on this thing, because I do not trust anything past about 1999 out of MFJ, because there's solder quality control, workmanship, people pushing irons. I mean, between you and me, and I know there's really nobody else listening, it's just you, me, the customer I'm on the phone with right now, and maybe a couple thousand of you guys. MFJ doesn't know how to solder shit. They don't. So we're going to double check that craftsmanship. Okay, let me get this put back together, and you guys can see here, up here in the corner. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What do you mean we're going to put high dollar RG-400 in here to replace the cheapest coax money could buy? What? What? No. This passed quality control. Think about that for a minute. Somebody actually visually inspected this and went, good enough, good to go. Send it out the door. We're going to replace this with some 316 coax. This is our output, or pardon me, the input that goes over and drives it. And then the output section hooks up over here. We've desoldered it. So the RF comes in from the combiner board here, passes through the myriad of switch traps, and then it comes out on this piece of coax here. I wanted to show you the guys this here though before we parted company. We're going to pay very close attention to this trace here and its sharp point that is making contact with the insulation jacket, and how it's completely exposed up to here. And if this was less than a 1/16 of an inch shorter, this would short out against that. So obviously we're going to replace this. Here is the solid core coax that I took out. It comes off the combiner over to the filter board. These pigtails that are on the end of this stuff are ridiculous. Look at this. It's like a 2-year-old stripped this shit. That's some kind of hard nylon. Well, we're going to replace this with stranded center conductor Teflon. And yeah. So I'm going to spend the next probably 15-20 minutes while I'm on the phone with a customer here. I'm going to unsolder this. I'm going to cut a piece of coax to match this. We'll get everything stripped back and ready for us to tin in. I'll go ahead and install all of this, but then I'm going to go over all of these traces just real quickly. Like we've got a couple of them, like this little guy over here. Look at this. This little guy is held on by a thread of spooge. And that's being generous. This is all hand soldered. Most of this is hand soldered. They must not know what a floating solder tray is down there, but it's MFJ. It's just MFJ. But we're going to build the best that we can with what we've been given, right? Okay, moving on. Let's get some coaxes out and let's get this going. Okay, well, I've crawled over most of this board. this is what the input coax used to look like. And here is it's this one. Here's what's left of the output coax. So I think my way of doing things is just a little bit more elegant. You have to be very careful with the small coax. If you press, like, you can only touch the side of the coax. You can never press down on it, right? So you'd always want to, we'll say this is your soldering iron, you always want to approach it from the side. You don't ever want to press down on it, because even though that's Teflon, it's paper thin, and like the main reason I'm replacing this piece is because this is the side that went up to the RF board, this side here. And you can see this thing has been smashed and soldered several times, and we don't really know if that's true 50 ohms or if there's like, it's been pinched and maybe 75 or even 100 ohms or even lower, 25, or if it's got a short in it, right? So we just might as well take it out and replace it. Most of the time we don't have to go to this level of intricate detail. This particular amp and the guy that it's going to, I feel a lot more comfortable knowing that this will probably be the last piece of amplifier or radio equipment he ever buys. I personally want to take it all the way down and look at it, right? And I'm glad I have, because every time I've taken it down, I found yet another layer of problem. So then what we'll do is we'll come in here and we'll sneak across the top of these traces. We'll throw ourselves a little bit of Kapton tape. Kapton is an amazing substance. I don't know how I got through life without it. I thank God for the NASA engineers and the guys at 3M that developed Kapton tape. It's got a very, 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 very high dielectric, and it's a fancy word for saying insulation property. It doesn't lean itself in any way, shape, or form until you get it really hot to conduct. So you see me use little pieces of this stuff everywhere. And if you're into space flight, you know, space equipment, ever watched anything about the Voyager probes or anything ever that we've ever put into space, this is the duct tape of the aerospace industry. It really is. Old Kapton tape, man. This stuff is amazing. And then certain forms of it, if you put a piece of foil backer, either it be gold, copper, bronze, or aluminum, and then in turn, this is just kind of help pin everything in place. You put a foil backer on it, now you've got this magical substance called mylar, which is an amazing insulator and also amazing at slowing down micrometeoroids and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, okay, this is all done. I feel comfortable here. We're going to flip the amp back on its back. We're going to slide this back in. We'll maneuver all of our coaxes into the places they need to go, and then we're going to bolt the board back down. Then we're going to go look at our control board. And once we get the control board, I go over all the solder work on the control board. Then it'll be time for us to start thinking about doing power wires, and we're on the downhill side of this thing is what I'm saying. So probably in the next 2 hours, 3 hours, we'll have this all put back together and we'll be running it. Okay. This is all back together. Everything's all hooked up the way it should be. Let's go look at this coax connector here. I think my way looks a lot better than the stock way, in my opinion. It's cleaved, it's got the right amount of insulation distance on it. We've got better capture here. The ground is closer to the cabinet. That actually makes a huge difference. But all in all, I mean, even down here, where the coax makes contact with the board, down here, this down here, It's perfectly cleaved. It's all at the right angle. I feel a lot safer sending this out of here like so. So the only thing I got left to do now is I got to take, and I usually grab this pin, and then I'll grab this bottom right hand corner pin, because that's where I bring the 8 gauge in on the connector. So we'll grab a wire here, and then we'll grab another wire here, and we'll bring them directly over and solder them to the board. This third one we let go to the cabinet. That way the rest of the circuitry can have some current flow too that's unimpeded. But the main idea is we want to get as much current delivered to here, to the heat sink. Not to the board, but to the sink. Because the sink is what carries the current, not the traces on the top. The traces on the top, yes, ultimately do. But the metal mass underneath can carry way more current than here. So we bring our grounds directly to this screw, which goes directly into the heat sink, and then there's an aluminum spacer underneath and all that kind of stuff. This is our stock wire. Let's talk about wire theory here real quick. I think this is a piece of 12 gauge, but that's our strand count inside the wire. It's fairly decent. The other day I did one of these and the guy had put his own power wires on the back of the plug. He said I didn't need to modify that. Okay. And what he used was silicone booted wire like this. This is 10 gauge. 12 gauge, 10 gauge. As we all know, electrons ride on the outside of the wire, and the more wire strands we have significantly increases the amount of surface area. So the surface area is the main dictating factor of how much current a wire can carry, right? So if we have a higher strand count, we can sneak more smooth through the wire than we can if we have the same gauge wire but only has 5 strands in it. This has 17 billion strands of wire in it. Really soft, oxygen-free annealed, right? So they annealed this in like nitrogen or argon, you know, a noble gas. And the strands, we can even get one of them to come off by themselves. Here we go. God damn, this is brittle wire, man. I pull off one strand by itself and it just busts off there. You can see the strand. This is like an angel's pube, right? Or this is like a grizzly old 90-year-old man's beard stubble. It's going to carry way more current, is the moral of the conversation here. So we're going to wire this thing. I totally forgot. I've got like a 250-foot roll of this that I bought. It's been hanging above my head for 4 years. I bought this back when I was doing RC cars. I've got hundreds of feet of this. It's 10 gauge, silicone. Doesn't break down till 300 C. That's what we're going to use to move the current around inside the amp. So almost twice the size of wire. Well over triple the amount of strand count. So we're going to try to see if we can get the the voltage restriction down even further and make this as efficient as we possibly can. Never done this on one of these amps before. I don't know how much it's going to improve, how well this works, but I had a guy ask me the other day, he goes, why do they have the power wire come from here all the way up to the front and then back over to the board? And I'm like, well, it's so it can go through the shunt. We're going to fish the wire through, figure out how long we need to make it, then we're going to slide it back out, and then we're going to put heat shrink on the outside of this, because this silicone jacket is very soft and is very prone to rub vibration issues. And it's one of the major reasons I don't like using it inside of the amp. The jacket's too soft, and the hard edge of the shunt, the wire coming through the shunt, could maybe someday rub through. So to help mitigate that problem, we're going to put a piece of heat shrink on this, and and we'll run it through and then loop it back over to here. So when we get back, our ground wires, which are here, will be trimmed, soldered, mounted. Our power wires will be trimmed, soldered. I'll have the chokes put in, which we put back here by the plug, with the ferrite and heat shrink. And I think we'll be ready to test drive this, I think. Okay, just so the owner knows, we're gonna grab this potentiometer. I had it set for 90 degrees. So when this gets over 90, that fan kicks on, just like what we discussed. And as you guys can see down in here, got the heat shrink going on, and we've got the silicone wire going everywhere here, so we're good. I literally threw everything but the kitchen sink at this, so we have to think for a minute that there's like two kinds of repair, right? We've got the power wire upgrade, very generic, let's just make it happen. And then we have this, which is all new transistors. Please, for the love of God, make it last for the rest of my life. Really slow down BBI and let's really look at it. Take your time. That's what this is. And throw everything in the kitchen sink. One's about $200, the other one's significantly more, and it's because of the cost of the transistors. The transistors alone in here are $600 to have Toshiba's used ones put in here. $1,000 for new ones at $250 a piece, because they're the legit, straight from RF parts, new Toshibas. Now, if we decided that we were going to repill this with the HG transistors, which aren't as forgiving and are a little bit more flaky, and you have to know this going in because their parts are made in China, and all of you guys in the United States know what that means. People that live in other countries, they might not understand, but from a very young age, it's been bred into our brain that if we even flipped over a car toy, like if we were at like the dollar store or whatever when we were a kid, or the drugstore, and we'd flip a toy over with our kid, you know, when we were kids, and we'd look at it and see it was made in China, we just put it back on the shelf because we knew it was garbage. That's changed, but the transistors, the HGs, they ain't the greatest in the world, but they're what we've got, and they're only $25 a piece versus $150 a piece or $250 a piece. So there's a difference, right? This guy is not afraid to sink the money into this thing because he recognizes that this thing is going to be his last amp that he's ever going to need, and he's going to just use this thing from now until the end of time. This is what he's got, so he's putting the money at it. So it's two different worlds, right? I love how this coax just lays in here. It's just perfect. The wires, just the perfect length. They're not twisted around each other. It's just happy. I'm happy that this is done. So we're going to start out here. We're on 160 meters radio. It's on 160. Down here, 1,000 watt in peak, 1,000 in average. Of course, the 5 watt slug back from the Bird 10,000 watt dummy load, and our spectrum. Here's the radio, 111111. Here's the radio, 11111111. Here's a pass-through through the amplifier. Now what we're measuring is the RF's ability to go from the radio, down the coax, through the coax connector, through the relay, back out the coax connector, and down to the dummy load. Ready? 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And even the bird meter that's over here that I never show, 1, 1, 1, 1, nothing. It's absolutely phenomenal pass-through. Okay. So now, the big reveal. Whoop, whoop. If we can call it that. Hello. 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 700. Pretty reliable. Here's our current draw. Hello. 86 amps on 160. Closer we get to that 100 watt mark, or the 1,000 watt mark, the more current it's going to draw. 1111111. Input tune is beautiful. Let's go over here, look at the spectrum analyzer. Sorry. We're looking way down here. We're going to be just seeing a line at the edge of the spectrum because we're looking at such a large spectrum. I used to have this set up so it only go to like 50 or 60 or 100 megahertz, and we could see the lower end of the band. Had too many people crying and whining to me, saying, "What? Didn't really do us any good. We can't really do any measurement, and you're a moron for not showing it out to like 300 or 500 megahertz." Okay, fine, whatever. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hello, 1, 2. Okay. Gouda. We're Gouda. Let's go. No seconds. No third orders. No nothing. So let's back this off, and then we'll go to 80. There's 80 meters. Hello, 111111. Talking through the box. Let's go look at the watt meter. 80. Hello, 1, 2. About 700 watts again. And as we all know, that'll roll off as we get higher in frequency. Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2. No second, third order harmonics. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Input tune. Got to make sure to show this. Hello, 1, 1, 1. It's beautiful. Perfect. Of course. Perfect. Okay. So now we're going to go up here. Go here, we're going to go here. Radio 11111. Of course, can talk right through it. Here's driving into the amplifier 11111. Hello. Okay. So now we're going to start to see the power roll off. We all know that. It's just, it's a Maritron. Hello, 1, 2. Still about 610, 620 watts. Over here on the spectrum. Hello, 1, 2. Squeaky clean. Good deal. Back over here. I want to stop real quick, and I want to thank the guys on Patreon for making this entire channel possible. These guys right down here at the bottom of the screen. Once again, thank you for letting us be able to have this hour-plus long video with no ads. YouTube's ads are just getting stupid, in my opinion. Let's jump up here a little bit. We'll go right there. Okay. Hello, 1111111. Hello, 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 hello. 1.4 below, which is perfect. Sorry, I'll find it. I'll find it. There it is. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hello, 1111111. That's amplifier. Hello, 111. That's radio. Okay. So, back over here, I know I'm making everybody sick. Let's see, where else can we go? Go here. Anything past this, we got to have the 10 meter board, which he does not have in the amplifier at the moment. And it goes right here, but he will be able to bolt it directly in once he gets it back to his place, because he will be opening it and bolting in the 10 meter board. So, hello, audio. There's our 500 watts. 500 watts. And if we hadn't done the power wire upgrade, it'd have been around 400 or so. Okay. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Input tune is perfect. And then again, over here on the spectrum. Hello, 1, 2. Everything's good. Okay. Now the amplifier is going to be warm at this point. The fan would have normally kicked on. So let's go in here. Now, to make it actually work and do its job, I'll put the lid on it. While the fan is doing fan things, I gotta tell you, Mr. G, I've enjoyed our several hour long phone calls that we've had the last 2 nights. I've really enjoyed getting to work with you, and thank you for your patience in sending this up and how long it took for me to get to it. You never called and complained, never called and bugged me. You were super cool about it. And I say thank you, sir. I appreciate you on the first level, and the second level, and the third level, and the fourth level of life. I think like I've actually made a new friend with you. And it's been a while since I've been as happy as I am today to be able to put that sticker on this amp. So right now our exhaust air temperature coming out of this thing is 107 degrees. $99. 107. We're looking up here. This tells us the crosshairs. This tells us the hottest thing in the screen. So we're going to see the temperature roll off here pretty quick. For the record, going back to the heatsink conversation, by the way, and me talking about the anodized coating and stuff, I would prefer to have anodized coating over a lapped piece of metal in this particular application. If it's not anodized, then yes, I would very much embrace the idea of having a lapped surface area. If you have one of these amps, and I know that you guys are going to copy me on what I'm doing here, be advised that you never, ever, ever, ever want to polish the foot of a Toshiba transistor unless it's a red dot. There is beryllium in the foot of the transistor. The transistors I put in here are old school cursive Toshibas. The OGs, the GOATs, the greatest of all times, right? There's beryllium in the feet of these transistors. So let's say we take a very flat piece of glass and then we glue down to it a piece of sandpaper, and then we sit there and we polish the bottom of the transistor. You are releasing little pieces of beryllium into the universe. If you do it dry and you create dust, that dust can and will get in your lungs and eventually will cause you to have lung cancer. Keep that in mind. So if you choose to lap your shit, have at it. If you choose to sand the bottom of your transistors, if they're not red dots, good luck. Wear a respirator. Take a shower afterwards. Pray. Well, gentlemen, on this note, I'm done. I've seen enough. I've been inside everything enough here. I've played with everything enough. I've touched all the parts that I need to touch, and I have a very high confidence that this amplifier will run incredibly well for this guy for the next 10 to 15 years of his life, which will put him at 95. Is what it is. Gentlemen, thank you for hanging in there with me for this last hour. Hopefully it's been slightly entertaining. Maybe learned a little bit from something from somebody. Hopefully it helped somebody out. I did get a comment the other day that somebody wanted to see a long form video. They wish that I'd go back to doing long form videos like this. They're very hard to shoot, especially when I'm trying to do fast repairs. Just get the project done and get it back out the door, because I've got a huge pile of stuff that I've been trying to work through that's been sitting here forever, and people are running out of patience, right? I get that. So I got everything from 2023 back for the most part, except for one project that's done. And now I'm just doing pickup work. I've got about 5 or 10 more of these little things to do, and then I'm going to go jump right into 2024. I've only got I physically counted the amps that I have here. I have 12. I will be taking on work soon. Not yet, but soon. Shout out to Penta, XS, Siglant, Bird, MechMan, Coaxial Dynamics, all of you guys. And Mr. G. Enjoy it. I've had a lot of fun bringing this thing back from the dead. On that note, I say, gentlemen, thank you. Mr. G, thank you for sending this up. I want to do more of these. So if you've got an ALS-500 that's broke down, call me. I want to help you out. Phone number's right there, by the way. I love when people put in the comments, what's your phone number? How do I get a hold of you? It's also available on bbiamps.com and on Facebook and on X. Mr. BBI is a screen name, and it's Box Builder Idaho on X. Gentlemen, I am the biggest mud duck in Idaho, and I'll see you. Bye.